Mark, we've been doing a lot of work on automatic thoughts. And because you've been having some insight and sometimes it comes up naturally, I've already thrown out the word core beliefs and explained a little bit before. Even doing a thought record a couple days ago, we talked about one of your thoughts was really a core belief, and we've done a couple diagrams with the arrows coming out of it. Does that sound a little bit familiar?
Yeah, like the I'm worthless, right?
Yes. That's a really good one. Okay. That seems to be, I think the two big ones for you have been I'm worthless, I'm unlikable, something like that. And so you've been making progress. Basically, we've been identifying and modifying some of these automatic thoughts, and you're making good progress with it. Yeah. I'm also noticing, though, that there's still some lingering, which is okay. It's perfectly it's natural. So the point is you're making progress, but I want to continue making progress. And I think it's going to be important for you to really maybe go a little bit deeper into where some of these automatic thoughts are coming from and those core beliefs that we've touched upon. So what I want to do is, in a few moments, is start, even though we kind of have an idea what the core beliefs are, still break them down a little bit more, identify them, maybe assess a little bit their history, because it might be relevant to how we talk about it now. And then it's possible we can also modify these core beliefs as well. But before we do that, I just want to make a few comments just to clarify what the heck these core beliefs are, just to be a little bit clearer. Does that sound okay?
That's good.
Okay. One of the things that we haven't spoken too much about is that core beliefs, for the most part, are due to significant life events that have happened in the past. Okay, this could either be literally events and or people involved in those events. So, for example, we've talked a little bit about worthlessness, unlikable. Maybe not. There may have been stuff that's happened to you, either as a child or adolescent. A lot of times people talk about how core beliefs start off as children or adolescents, but it could be events that have happened not too long ago in our adulthood as well. So that's something we're going to talk a little bit more about. Is that okay to explore that a little bit? So we'll spend a little bit of time doing that. The other area that I always want to make sure I tell clients, but we're kind of already there, is that we have what's called the category of lenses. Some psychologists and therapists kind of put them into three categories. One's the helpless one. Sometimes you do talk about being hopeless, so we might explore that. Then there's the worthlessness category. There's different varieties of being worthless. And then there's another category called unlovable. But for you, I think it's more of there's different components that fit into unlovable, and I think yours is more, seems to be more the unlikable scope. Okay? And something that we can't completely control is that this is who we are is related to our temperament and our biology, kind of how we come into this world and interact. And part of that is influenced by the environment, obviously, as well. One element that comes from that some of the literature talks about is the coping skills that we use. There are some events or problems that I could be really good at using my skills to cope with, others not so much. And so, me and I've used this language, but we've talked about how sometimes when something happens, for example, your withdrawal, that technically is a coping skill, right? But maybe it's not the most effective.
Going to play video games is great and all, but it's not going to really change.
That's a great example, too, of how in the short term,
it feels better.
Exactly. In the long term, we end up regretting it, or in your case, feeling guilt. Even too in the past, way back in the day, if we had a core belief that developed, some of the things that we used to do in the past used to be effective, used to work. So we can maybe explore maybe some of the things that, like when you're an adolescent, you started getting depressed. You mentioned a few things, not quite withdrawal, but you would do other things that actually kind of worked, like you would get over the episode. But now those same things aren't quite working anymore. So I think we need to explore what those skills are and which ones we can keep using that are working and which ones we can change. Does that sound okay too? Okay. Another thing I want to talk about as well is that when we have these core beliefs, we tend to find information in our lives that support it really well. So we kind of joke before, you're really good at picking out little things that kind of
minimize
right? Yeah, exactly. And so we either find things that support it really well, or if something contradicts it, it's whatever, it's not. But to give you credit, this is why I think we're ready to do the core beliefs, is you've been picking up some of this patterns or tendencies with these automatic thoughts and talking about them. So I think that's going to be helpful to work on. The other thing I try to emphasize with clients as well is that these core beliefs that we're talking about, they're completely normal. We all have them. So if you're sitting there thinking, what's why they all have all these negative, what's wrong with me, is part of it is that everyone that could sit in this room, myself, our friends, family, we all have core beliefs, both positive and negative as well. Okay. So even someone who's not depressed, still going to have negative core beliefs. We still have, just like we have negative automatic thoughts. The difference is that, especially lately, the last couple of years, you've had a lot of life stressors have been happening. So what happens with these life stressors, they tend to make some of these negative core beliefs more salient. Yeah. They bring them to the surface. And so going back to the previous comment, we start focusing more on the negative, and anything that disputes it kind of gets pushed to the side. So just keep that in mind as we work through this, is that it's okay to have these core beliefs. Okay. It's just, and it's okay to even have some negative ones, but when we start getting stressed out and they start feeling like they're really real and they start dominating our life, it's time to make some changes.
It's kind of like that negative cycle in a way.
Exactly. Exactly. You have the core belief, the thought, and then in other case, if you're not that stressed out, it kind of just, our positive core beliefs take over. In this case, your negative core beliefs with that cycle have been more predominant. Okay. Now, the good news with this is that we can test and modify these core beliefs, not exactly the same way, but very similar to these automatic thoughts. So some of the techniques that we've already been doing for automatic thoughts, we can also use for core beliefs, right? But you'll notice they'll feel a little bit different. The process will be a little bit different. It's one thing, to be honest with you, it's one thing to talk about one specific event and go, oh, I can think differently about that. And you've been doing a great job with it. Now this will feel a little bit different in that we're not talking about just one event. We're talking about generally
big picture.
This is how I really feel about myself. So some of the techniques will be similar, but the process emotionally may feel a little bit different. And then there are some other techniques that are specific to core beliefs. The good thing to kind of end on the note here before I want to talk about identifying is that we can develop some new core beliefs. Okay? So they don't have to be this way. I don't like to always use the word more positive, right? But the way I look at it is maybe some of these negative core beliefs, if they're over here, we can make them more maybe valid, honest, accurate, logical, whatever word, language we want to use. So it may not go way over here, but we can kind of, does that make sense?
A little bit more reasonable.
A little bit more reasonable, a little bit more accurate. And that more accurate core belief sometimes, but not always, can also mean positive as well. Okay. Do you know what I mean? So we won't always call them more positive core beliefs. We'll call them more accurate or new core beliefs. And if you don't have to change, we're not going to go through like 10 or 12 core beliefs, but I think there are 2 or 3 core beliefs that we could use to kind of identify, clarify, and then as we modify them, this is we can make them more adaptive or more accurate.
That makes sense. I mean, it kind of sounds like, if we can just kind of like push the needle a little bit, it would kind of make me feel a little bit better and kind of change what I'm thinking. Good.
That's a good way to put it. You're already kind of getting it. We're not going from one point to another.
It's just a little bit.
We're pushing it on the continuum. And then we'll go see as far as we can realistically go. And each core belief might be a little bit different. And you're absolutely right. If we can shift those core beliefs, then maybe we'll affect those thoughts that kind of pop into our head a little bit too often than we want to. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do then is start identifying or clarifying what core beliefs we want to focus on, okay? Okay, let's do that.